first sentence of the memoir is this: 40 years later, you're sitting across the desk from a psychologist wondering if you'll ever be able to sleep an entire night and if you can find some way to trust people. We're 50 years on now. In fact, from your time in Vietnam, we're more than 50 years on. So I guess my first question is, how things gone in terms of wondering, will I ever be able to sleep an entire night, and will I be able to trust anyone?
Well, I would certainly like to sleep a full night. Between memories and dogs, it gets a little difficult, but I can't blame it on the dogs entirely. The odd thing is that when I have an interrupted sleep, I revert back very, very often to Vietnam and the loss. And then recently, one of my teammates has died, so that, you think about him, and the very fact that I hadn't seen him for 4.5, 5 years, because I got involved in retirement and everything, and I knew he wasn't doing well, and you feel guilty for not taking the time to go down there to see him. So those things prey on you, and we stay close with the teammates that do remain. But it's Vietnam itself that doesn't go away. I don't consider anything I did heroic, or myself as being a hero or anything like that. I had lost 4 teammates right off the bat, and that's a heroic sacrifice on their part. As far as I don't know what happened in that battle to any great extent, but you lose people like that. You want your writing to respect them, to show them the decency that you're not going to make this about yourself being important, because you're only part of what happened.
Yeah.
I was a very small part of very, very small part of what happened in Vietnam, period. Yeah. But collectively, all of us did the best that we could with the assignment we were given. And I think it was important to bring out the fact that not everything ran smoothly too. That here I was at that time the military's most elite unit, at least the Army's most elite.
Yeah.
And there were people who I didn't think belonged there.
Reenlistment, the primary factor in your decision not to reenlist was that just the kind of leaders that you'd had to serve under for a while. Do I have that right?
Yeah, because I went from what I thought was good leadership, or trust officers I could trust, team sergeants I could trust. They weren't perfect human beings, but they had the best interest of the mission and their men in mind. And then later on, what happened was we got replacements in there that I didn't think were. For instance, the team sergeant at the end. I mean, I can speak freely, I suppose. The Holman, who came in, I don't think he ever went through Special Forces training. I think he came from a group. He was promoted in the 82nd Airborne and somehow got in charge of running a club. And then when he came to Vietnam, they put him in a club. And then at 6 months, he was able to transfer. And here was a guy who'd never served on an A-team before I got there. And they sent him out to our camp as a team sergeant. He just and he treated us, the younger soldiers, as if we were incompetents and subordinates that needed to be, kept under the thumb or something. I don't want to denigrate his service to the country or anything, but he was a bad fit. He was a bad fit for the outfit. And because after I left, Gritzmacher, who I would have been the longest standing soldier there at the camp, Gritzmacher had a run-in with him, and he threatened to beat Gritzmacher up, and Gritzmacher actually was on guard with the shotgun, and he just shoved the shotgun in his chest and said, "Come on, do it." And Gritzmacher's not the kind of guy that would have done that unless this guy had really pushed him hard the wrong way.
I said, "I'm thinking I should roll a hand grenade down there. He's going to get us killed." So Grits looked in Holman's direction as if considering it. Though I wasn't sure to what degree I meant it, I decided to push it. "We could blame it on the VC," I said. "Who would know?" "You serious?" "Yeah." And suddenly I was. That's crazy. Now you end up not doing that. Is it now? Are we talking about the same leader here?
Same Holman. He camped us out on an open side of a hill, right below the tree line. It was an ideal opportunity for the Viet Cong to come find us and be in they would have been in the wooded area and in all that cover and everything else. We were in the open, and we could have, it was just nuts. It was just stone nuts. And this is after he had us walking on trails. We didn't walk on trails. We walked near them if we had to, but we didn't walk on trails. He had us humping up and down on trails, and it was just, and I think it was either that one or another operation or another patrol we were on where he gave the wrong coordinates. He read the map wrong. And then if you tried to correct him, you say, well, those are the wrong coordinates. That leaves us vulnerable out there in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't so much that you worried about the soldiers turning on you in battle when you were in the field, but at camps in Vietnam, we would actually, when camps were hit, and I think it happened at Ashau, for instance, there were a portion or a group of the soldiers that were Vietnamese, CIDG, that actually turned around and began firing and joined the Viet Cong, or they were infiltrated. And we had people who would come at our camp to do construction, help with construction, and sometimes you'd see them, they were like scoping out what was going on, and that was a concern. Why is he interested in what's going on over there? So there was that, and then we would go on med stracks, and you never knew. If nothing else, they may be passing on intelligence about us to the Viet Cong that were nearby.
Yeah.
And then some of them were related to the Viet Cong that were in the nearby villages. So it's possible it could come from any angle. The one I trusted my mountain yards when because I was the advisor to the combat recon platoon, and I went out with Trung Si Ku, who was a super soldier. I trusted them because you make this connection with them, and I think that they were noted for really liking Americans. The Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese would come into their villages and take their food supplies, take their young men and force them into labor, and sometimes force them into joining in the ops. So it was just it's not quite like the Middle East where the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I think that they just, because they were treated with respect, and they learned to trust Americans, and Americans trusted them. I think there was a stronger connection there.
Tigers, leopards prowled the night. Pythons and deadly vipers crawled the damp floor. My feet and back ached. Leeches left my legs bleeding. It was impossible to find a comfortable position for sleep. I couldn't know what might happen now or at dawn or the next day, but I wanted to be nowhere else, right? And one of the things that seems to come through in your memoir is this ambivalence. That is not as, I've heard it I've heard it expressed very starkly by some vets. You're not nearly that stark, but I've heard some vets say that Vietnam or combat was the worst thing I've ever experienced, and it was also awesome, and there are some things I miss about it. Does that make sense to you at all? Is that, you're reciting all these things and how awful it is. You don't mention combat in this particular passage, but of course that's there. But then you end the sentence saying, but I wanted to be nowhere else.
I think it's because there's something really true, that it's truthful. You can't ignore it. It's all truthful. It's all around you, and it's not. None of it's a lie. None of it is cloaked in anything. It's as honest an experience as anyone can have. I think that in social situations, that even as we're experiencing it, we're often creating a narrative to go with it to make it appear more honest than it is. We put up all sorts of facades, small and large and everything else, in order to maneuver through what society is like, whatever the social aspect is, whether it's work or anything else. And so when we're out there, there's no escape from the pain that you're going through or the exhaustion or anything else. If nothing else, that this is honest, this is real, this is what humankind experienced to become what they have become in civilization. It's going back to the core of what we were. We were people who ambulated across continents.
Yeah.
And slept on hard ground. And at the same time, the amazing thing is that they managed to nurture children and each other's lives. And I imagine that because they were so dependent upon each other in that way, that social interaction was far more honest than, and that's part of the interaction you have with other soldiers, because you're both experiencing the same thing, and there's something very honest about your interaction. That's why. Yeah. That's why another reason when we talk about somebody like Holman or Horan, I don't think that I didn't see that same kind of honesty about the experience with them that I saw with somebody like Hank Luthi, or Norwood or Fritzmacher when we went out, or Willie Hunter. Willie Hunter was probably as fine a soldier as you'd ever want to meet, and he was a quiet, closed person around us and everything else. But if you went out in the field, you saw the real Willie Hunter. He didn't hide anything. You're out there with Willie or those other guys. You had a complete sense of trust. I regret in some ways that I had to witness really competent, nice individuals die. People that I cared about, that I knew were, and one took my place on patrol. I was supposed to go out on that operation the day that they died. And so, you live with that kind of regret that somebody that you felt deserved. They had family. Brownie and Riff Schneider and Jacobson all had family, and the only ones that were supposed to be on that operation were Pablo and myself. And so at the last minute, both of us were told to stay in camp, and they went out, and the rest of them went out. And so here's guys who had family to go home to and everything, and I was a single guy. In the world of where you're saying, if the world were fair and everything was just outright, they would have gone home, and I would have gone to the operation.
Yeah.
So you live with that kind of thing. It's not so much guilt. It's a hard sense of things to explain. It's just, it has to do with the balance of the world. And you realize that the world is balanced in very harsh ways, that it doesn't. It's not like the scales of justice are supposed to be. You know, it's a very unjust life. Do I wish that in the political sense Vietnam had turned out better for everybody? Yes. But the Vietnamese have proven themselves to be very resilient people, and they've sprung back from, you know, they had like 30 years of war that they had to spring back from. And you have to admire what they've done with their country, even though it's a socialist country to a large extent. They've done very, very well, and that's to their credit. Would Vietnam be any better off had it been? I think what I regret when I talk about that is that what the people we left behind. For instance, I don't know what happened to Trung Si Koo. He fought against the Viet Minh with the French, and he fought against the Japanese in World War II. He was a dedicated soldier, but he would have been the enemy of the state. Was he sent to a rehabilitation? Those are the kind of things that I wish Vietnam had turned out better for them.
Yeah.
The ones behind the mountain yards and the others. Yeah.
I hear that. What do you think young people today should know about the Vietnam War?
One of the things that I think they should understand is that the larger political aspects of the war had to do with a belief or two beliefs that were in conflict at the time. Our basic belief that America is undeniably the best country that's ever been assembled based on the rights that it gives its people and its love of freedom and opportunity and everything else, versus a harsh totalitarian system that suppresses those very things. But more importantly, there was the geographics that was involved in it. And do I believe there was an international communist conspiracy to undermine America and undermine us? I do. And I think many of us, when we grew up believing that the communists were the enemy, and that Vietnam would be the proxy war. We couldn't start launching missiles with Russia, because that would be obliteration of the world or civilization.
Right.
So what we had to do was fight proxy wars. I would tell these young people that Vietnam gives us a lesson that even if it doesn't make sense to some of the peoples, often these wars that we fight, we have to fight them, and that yes, it's the great generation came out of World War II. No doubt about it, when we highly regard what they did. But their service to world peace, as great as it was, at an individual level, was no different than the service that those who went to Vietnam did for their Army or their Marine Corps or their Navy or their Air Force. It was to do something for their country. And so when you think about Vietnam, when you think about those who served and everything else, remember they served their country. And I think if we hadn't fought in Vietnam, that what happened with the Soviet Union, the collapse of the Soviet Union, probably wouldn't have occurred the way that it did. The other thing I would have to know is this, that World War II defined America as everybody understood America. But Vietnam was the war that defined the politics of the 20th century and even in the 21st century. World War II doesn't define the politics.
Yeah. Do you agree with those who say that the divisions that exist in the country today have some of their roots going back to the Vietnam era?
Absolutely. I cannot imagine some of the people that are in politics these days picking up a rifle and going to Vietnam. I can imagine a lot of them carrying signs saying, or even going out and chanting "baby killer" to soldiers coming back. I can see more of those at play. It's unfortunate that there was no chance that any politician who was a Vietnam veteran was ever going to be president of the United States.